Hi everyone, I'm Yashvir, and welcome to our audio channel, The Bro Code. So what's this channel about? The name suggests it's about your typical bro code, rules followed by guys, right? But this runs deeper than that. I guess we wanted to discuss how we have grown through life and how various situations have shaped us. By the means of the podcast on this channel, we hope to say something meaningful and impactful that perhaps you can use in yours. So please join us in this inspiring journey. We hope it helps you in some way. Hey everyone, and welcome again to another one of those weird podcasts that you sometimes listen to, maybe. I hope everyone's doing well today, and we're really drawing close to the end of the year now, and I hope all of you have some cool plans later this year. So I'd like to bid a real warm welcome again to Prush and Dean. So how are both of you today?
Doing good, thanks. And yourself?
Oh, I really don't have any complaints. Doing well on my end.
Good to know. Good to know. Good.
I'm good. I have a lot to complain about.
Ooh. Like what?
Ooh, yeah. Give us
What
one
don't I
or
have?
two.
Everything is worth complaining about.
You can't just complain about everything. I mean, Chelsea
There
has
must be
win. You should
some
be
good
happy.
things. There must be some good things in your life right now. Good.
Should have scored more.
Oh,
You scored
4-0
four. I don't think you have.
Juve.
I don't think you can really ask for much more than that.
That's true.
Could have asked for one more at least.
Well, perhaps.
Grief.
I mean,
Just
okay. Well, even football is giving you grief. Then good.
Yeah, it's all
It's
good.
not great.
Life is pain.
Life is pain. Wow.
Wow, you're just a
We
real
should-
sunshine today.
yeah, we should really explore this instead of what we're going to talk about today.
Yes, I
No.
agree.
A day in the life of Prush. Why is Prush
No.
so aggro? Why did Prush wake
No,
up today
I don't.
and choose violence?
I don't know. You're doing a diet, man. Carry on.
What is death really? I mean,
Oh, that's true.
could explore that question.
Someday. Perhaps at some time. Okay, well, letting Prush, I guess, soak in his own gravy. Let him deal with that.
I like
That so
expression.
doesn't sound right.
What do you mean?
I quite like.
It's
I'm stealing that expression.
it's an expression because when you're wallowing in your own self or whatever, you're just soaking in your own gravy. Something that you're making up for yourself. It's something that you've made up for yourself, which is why I say soaking gravy. Anyway, that's how the saying goes. I think maybe.
All right. So topic for today.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, so today's topic is related to, I guess, to a person being an overthinker, and how it affects their lives. I guess this in my own life is, in most instances, how it has hurt us, how it hasn't, and it's just something I thought we'd like to talk about. So I guess my first question is, in your opinions, what is an overthinker? What is overthinking? I always like to start with the definition first.
Well, to me, overthinking is someone who just sees past the situation and like imagines more outcomes and thinks about things like more than they need to.
Is there a difference between overthinking and nitpicking in a situation?
Yeah. So overthinking is like you try to think about every different scenario of what could happen. Say, for example, you're sitting in a situation, right? You think about everything that could happen, but also you think about how people would react, and also how you imagine situations that may not necessarily be real, right? Whereas nitpicking is like the situation has occurred, or a situation is occurring, and now you're like picking at the situation to find faults and to find issues with something that may not necessarily be there. right? Or you're trying to analyze something even more in detail, where maybe it's not necessary, or it's just more than you'd normally analyze. So nitpicking is like the situation is occurring and has occurred, whereas overthinking is like the opposite. You're trying to imagine different scenarios that could happen.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I think
That's what
I
I
would
see.
probably go with a similar definition to that. It's just you're taking the thought process or the process of thinking of a situation too far, and you're just going one step too many.
So it's like your thoughts on overdrive then, letting them, I guess, stray from what they normally would in any particular situation.
Well, a lot of people say I normally overthink. So I mean, the
Mm.
normal is a relative term there, but
Yeah,
I think it's going beyond what's necessary, as well as going beyond what's going to benefit you
yeah.
in terms of thought.
Well, remember, it's not always bad, right? Like people usually look at
True.
overthinking as a bad thing, right? But
Hmm.
it's not the worst thing in every case.
Yeah.
That's true. I mean, it can
So,
be. It's potentially an act of self-preservation as well and safety.
okay. So you mentioned it's not. I mean, there's always been like a bad spin on certain terms. Has there been moments where it has had positive impacts for you? So a situation in your, can you think of a situation in your past or present where actually thinking to its full breadth has actually helped you?
Yeah, I mean, you think about something far enough, you can think about all the different things that could happen, right? And then you could prepare for something better. You know, say for example, you want to do a presentation. You can think about all the ways your presentation could go well or wrong, and then try and prepare for them to not go wrong.
Yep. For me, in terms of a professional level, I mean, overthinking. I mean, I work in advertising, and we deal with social media quite regularly. And there have been plenty of cases where overthinking has saved us from making one of those social media blunders that gets brands into trouble, because you overthink and you come across a situation where you think, well, actually, maybe there's a particular audience that might take offense to this. And we didn't consider it in the beginning because none of us took offense to it, but we never considered how someone else might feel. And that saved us from putting out, social media posts that could have potentially been quite harmful. So in those cases, it can be quite beneficial to overthink.
And so, I mean, what I'm getting then is like you're trying to explore every single scenario, but there might be too many scenarios for you to explore in the end.
Yeah, it's at the end of the day, it's
Does
risk
that?
mitigation, right?
Yeah.
That's what a lot of overthinking comes from. It's minimizing risk or mitigating risk, and you can never minimize or mitigate all risk. You just do it to a degree where you feel comfortable, and I think
Hmm.
that's where people will overthink. They overthink until they feel comfortable, and if you don't ever get to the point where you're comfortable, you don't stop overthinking.
So then, is it a coping mechanism to try and gain control?
It's a control mechanism. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And okay, so what is then the difference between, for example, I think you mentioned nitpicking earlier, Guj. What's the difference between, I guess, then overthinking and being calculated or methodical?
So there's it's different scenarios. I mean, some people would say overthinking is a form of being calculated and like you say methodical, right? But then some people maybe the best way to explain it is using examples, right?
Yeah.
Um, so being methodical and being like critical and being like thorough is a way to like analyze situations that you could use to your benefit, right?
Hmm.
Um, a similar example would be, say, for example, you're in a work situation, right? And as I said, you're trying to prepare for something. Like I think Dean used a good example, right? Um, you're trying to prepare for something, you go through all the elements and you say, we could evaluate it this way, we could see that this could go wrong, that could go wrong. You're being methodical, you're being critical, right? And yes, you're overthinking about all the possible things that could happen, but and they may never even come to fruition, but it could benefit you so that you come up with a more robust solution. But say, for example, you're in a different scenario now where um, you are with a friend, right? And you said something, right? And maybe your friend hasn't responded or something like that. Now you're sitting and overthinking about, are they upset with me? Are they happy? Did they take it the wrong way? That's also being methodical. It's not being methodical, but it's being critical of what you said, right? But it also works in a negative way where, like, you're now thinking of scenarios that may not even happen, and your friend was probably just like went to the bathroom and come back,
Mm-hmm.
um, so it works both ways. I mean, you could use it to your benefit, but it could also be detrimental. It's just you need to be able to define what could work for you and what not could work for you, but when you're overthinking something that's unnecessary versus when you're being methodical and calculated about using your imaginary capabilities or
Imaginary
Yash was
imaginative capabilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the question was,
Sorry.
what's the difference between being, was it
Calculated and
methodical,
methodical. Yeah.
calculated or methodical versus overthinking?
Yeah.
So for me, the way I see that is calculated and methodical approaches are rooted in discipline and diligence designed to achieve an outcome. Overthinking is, for me, rooted in fear designed to avoid an outcome. Does that make sense?
Rooted in fear, designed to
And
avoid an outcome.
yeah, one is trying to achieve an outcome, the other one's trying to avoid an outcome. One is fear and control based, the other one is diligence and discipline based. So you are calculated and methodical because you want a specific outcome to occur
Mm-hmm.
more often than not. And then the other one, overthinking, it's a fearful control thing. It's risk mitigation. You're trying to avoid the worst case scenario.
And is that something that's, I guess, where does
Is
it
that
come
something you
from?
guys
Like,
agree
why
with,
is
by the
it?
way?
Yeah, no, no, I get what
Yes,
you're
yeah.
saying. That whole fear and control thing, right? You're trying to, for example, now it's like how Prush said in that example where he was using a social example where they were communicating between two friends, and your mind's racing on building these scenarios which don't exist. Like first thing is always fear, um, that comes to it. Like I agree with that, right? But like where do you think it started, and why do you think it's necessary? Or like how did your brain now automatically say, I'm going to go to this mode of trying to find answers now where there are no real questions? There was no real question asked.
Well, it's an evolutionary response, right? Something happened, it was a negative response, and your brain evolved to go, right, to avoid this from happening again, you need to consider the following. And that's gradually become worse over time or more refined over time, depending on how you look at it.
So an evolutionary response to, I guess,
I could be
avoidance of
talking out of
pain
my
and
ass,
pain.
but it's just my opinion.
I'm going to bleep that word
So
out. Okay.
the way I
Yeah.
think the question that you asked was, where did it start, right, and how did your body
Yeah.
now react, right?
Yeah.
For me, it's a defense mechanism that you've learned over time because of either emotional or physical trauma.
Sure.
Yes, I agree. Definitely agree.
So that's the thing that it starts at. Either you've experienced it or watched someone else go through it, and then you've realized that thinking about every possible scenario protects you, and that's where it comes from for me.
So it's a
Plain
preparedness
and
then for
simple.
every possible scenario, which is why you're trying to overthink.
So it also remember that it's your way of trying to prepare yourself for an emotional shock, because you've had an emotional shock and now you don't want to undergo that
Mm.
emotional shock again. It's sort of an in between state between like someone that's like reacts really badly to emotional shock and someone that doesn't react badly to emotional shock, or someone that can deal with emotional shock very easily, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
actually in the middle, where someone that doesn't know how badly they're going to react, they actually start to prepare themselves for things, right? Which is, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's not ideal. You don't really want to have to prepare yourself for something that may not possibly happen, right?
That's true.
You
um
That's
could
true.
substitute the word prepare for protect as well. You could be
yeah,
trying to
yeah, yeah,
protect
but
yourself from those outcomes as
we,
well.
yeah, yeah, look, the reason we use prepare is because you're preparing to protect yourself from something that could happen or could not happen,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
but the thing is that it's like, um it's nice to have the ability to overthink, but also remember that even people that are overthinkers, they're not necessarily the people that can view everything in the big picture, right? So
No, because
even
they're
overthinkers
extending
may
their
not.
perspective, but it's not a
Yeah,
360 perspective. It's just from their
yeah.
point
So
of
you,
view.
yeah, yeah. So you're not always protecting yourself completely anyway, but it's always to the best of your ability. So it also becomes one of those
Yeah.
things where I'm just trying to think of anything that could go wrong. But it's such a it's a defense mechanism. I mean, how many times have you seen those memes where there's always this guy is having an argument in the shower? I think it's the one where Joe Rogan and those two other guys are like watching an MMA fight. It's a picture from that one. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's like
Yeah.
me having an argument in the shower, and then the shampoo bottles is like Joe Rogan reacting to that thing. Did you see
I've seen
that?
that. I've seen
It
that
was
meme. Yeah,
it was
yeah,
such a funny one, but it's like that,
hmm
it's like that. So it was really funny. But that's basically what I feel like it is. You're arguing with yourself, right? And you're playing through things through your mind, but it's ultimately there as a protection mechanism for either emotional or physical shock, pain,
So can it also be then
protection.
therapeutic to kind of act these scenarios out, or soothing, I guess, to act these scenarios out and play them in your head and things
I
like
think you
that?
might be straying between overthinking and processing.
Mm.
Because I think one thing you're talking about processing stuff, you're playing out things in your head, you're trying to consolidate information.
hmm
Whereas in one scenario, you're obsessing about what could happen. Whereas
Yeah.
the other one, you're just trying to absorb and make sense of stuff.
Yeah,
Okay, so the reason why I kind of asked that, I mean, you guys were kind of leading onto that by saying, playing those scenarios is a fear mechanism, and you try to play outcomes. But that whole role play, you're playing two people there. You're also playing someone else, and you're playing yourself. Kind of projecting, like you mentioned, projecting someone else's opinion as well.
yeah, yeah.
That's
Mm.
why I went to say, role playing thing.
Mm.
But good. I want to just go back to in your previous comment, if you remember. You said you were distinguishing between like your imaginary versus your real, stuff. How do you
Yeah.
identify what's real and what's imaginary, or what's like your process there?
Yeah. So, oh, you mean like in any scenario?
Yeah, in any scenario,
Yeah,
really.
you have to look at it for plainly what it is. I mean, you have to understand plainly what something is versus. But everybody has different perceptions as well. So, like my understanding of what something is plainly and your understanding of what something is plainly is
hmm
purely dependent on how deep we look into it, right?
Sure.
You could look at a person who's smiling and be like, "Oh, they're happy," and I'll look at that person and be like, "Yeah, they look content, but from what I can see, they're not necessarily happy." You know,
hmm
it's purely perspective, right? But it's also opinion. So, real versus imaginary is it's very much the person based. But people try to derive meaning from things that not necessarily have a lot of meaning. Um,
hmm
I don't know.
I
It's
mean,
not the
there's
easiest
that
question
there's
to
that
answer. Yeah,
saying. No, no, I
yeah,
get you, but there's that
yeah,
saying, life is the meaning that we give to it, and it's
Yeah.
100% that.
yeah,
At any particular time, we decide what something means anyway,
yeah, yeah.
which is what you're
That's
alluding
true.
to there,
Yeah, but
and
but to me,
with the
there's
whole
yeah,
smile
yeah.
thing anyway.
Yeah, but that's an example, right? But I mean, like, if we had
Yeah,
to say, what would you say that the difference between an imaginary situation and like the real situation in your head is? If you try to remove that little incessant person in your head, right,
yeah,
and look at it plainly for what it is, without your opinion being derived onto the situation, that's more or
mm-hmm.
less simply what it is. The minute you
Mm-hmm.
start inferring things, right, without someone saying anything or without the situation actually unfolding, that's when you
Yeah,
start adding imaginary to it. Simply put.
mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dean, your distinguisher between, I guess, real and imaginary. If you do have anything else to add.
I don't really think I have too much to add on that because, I mean, yeah, I think it really is down to perspective and or perception. And it's not just perception of a scenario, but your perception of a person because then you're trying to assume how they're going to react before they react. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where you can kind of spiral.
Yeah.
But I don't really have anything else beyond that to add.
Okay. And then has there been any situation in the past where overthinking has limited you from clear opportunities? got you questioning yourself or doubting yourself or limiting yourself?
I think it's protected me from bad decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Has it limited me from opportunities? Depends on what you consider an opportunity, because an opportunity is an open-ended thing. It could be good or bad. Um,
Yeah,
so by definition, it was called an opportunity at the time, and then after the
sure.
fact, it came to light that it wasn't a very good opportunity. It was just an opportunity. Mm, I wouldn't say it's limited me really too much. That's dangerous, though. Overthinking can limit you, so don't go by what I do. I'm not a good example.
Cool. All right. Prash, do you have any?
Yeah, I would definitely say overthinking has limited me
Yeah.
in pretty much
In
every
what
aspect
way?
of my life.
Oh, okay.
Pretty much every aspect. You end up doubting yourself. So overthinking creates self doubt in a lot of ways. It may
Does
have
it
its
come from self
benefits, but
doubt? Does it come
uh,
from a lack of confidence?
it comes from a lack of confidence. But overthinking, as I said, remember it's a protection mechanism, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's a protection mechanism. But the more you question stuff, the more opportunities there are to look at things from a different light, right? Whereas when you go with instinct, right, you may suffer with like the wrong action, right? But going with instinct from for me, obviously this is personal, right? But going with instinct from me generally works out better than if I overthink something and then go do something. Like yes, I'll be better off with a safer answer and going on the safer route and stuff like that. But a lot of the time, like instinct is also measured, if you know what I'm saying. Yeah, so I also think like confidence and what was the other thing that we were saying, Dean? Confidence and self doubt, right? Self doubt. In this context, they're a little bit of sort of uh, fuel, but also byproduct, right? Whereas there's two things
Yeah.
that we need to look at.
Yeah.
I mean, as like hard rules or hard things. Like instinct is something that's like hard, right? You act on instinct, right? You have the ability to push the button when you need to go, and then overthinking is like sort not the opposite, but it creates a space where instinct can't operate freely, you know, and I see it as sort of the opposites to each other in some way. Whereas overthinking would you'd sit there and even though you had an instinct, you sort of ignore it and you suppress it slightly to see all the different options that would work better for you, right? And there doesn't necessarily have to be self doubt and a lack of confidence, even though they are either fuel or a byproduct of overthinking, right? Because, but for me, it's like a person that has overthinking naturally wouldn't go, or a person that is an overthinker and wouldn't naturally just go and act on impulse in most scenarios. In some scenarios where they're comfortable, they would, but in some scenarios where they're not comfortable, they wouldn't naturally act on instinct, um, and they'd have to be their inhibitions would have to be slightly limited for them to act on instinct, and that's where the difference comes in. The minute you have this person that has to like overthink on a lot of new scenarios in their life, that's where the problems come in, and then they start creating the self-doubt, lack of confidence, movement, slowed movement, lack of decision making, and generally that's where life doesn't speed up quickly. Life doesn't remain at this pace. It's sort of staggered. A decision is made, that decision is looked at, it's evaluated, then the next decision is made, etc., etc., and then it follows from there. Which I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but um, obviously, you don't really want to live life continuously reevaluating everything that you've done.
It does, but I mean, I get what you're saying, but I feel like it's the other way around. I think it's the self doubt or the lack of confidence that pushes the overthinking. Because if you were confident, you wouldn't need to
Yeah,
overthink. You would just pick a route and go. And it's the self doubt and lack of confidence that
hmm
requires protection to begin with, and then I suppose it can spiral into more self doubt after the fact. But I think for
yeah,
me, I've always seen it as the root of it coming from the need to protect myself is that I don't have confidence in what's going to happen. Because if you're overthinking, that's something that you've evolved to do over
yeah.
time
But
because
I
you've had
also,
bad
yeah,
experiences, and bad experiences for a lot of people lead to a lack of confidence because you were unsuccessful. A lot of people don't see a bad experience for the lesson; they just see it as a bad experience. Overthinking for me is it's still coming from because I've had bad experiences, my confidence is low. So in order to avoid the next bad experience, I'm going to overthink this. It's not to say confident people don't overthink stuff. It's just that there's less overthinking if you're confident. Yeah. No, I don't think it's creating self doubt. I think it's self doubt that prevents them from picking a route and going. So you've got confident person and overthinker. Confident person looks at the scenario, analyzes it, and then goes. Overthinker looks at the scenario, analyzes it, has an answer, but is unsure of that answer, so therefore finds multiple answers and then tries to weigh them all up because he's not sure. And the lack of surety comes from self doubt or lack of confidence. He's not confident in the situation. That's why you overthink. If you look at there's plenty of people that will do something like instantly, right? Like think about what do you do without thinking. If you're an overthinker, there's definitely something in your life that you can do without having to think. It's because you know what the outcome will be. There's confidence there. I'm saying in the situation, the reason you're overthinking is because you do not have confidence in the decisions or the options you have. You do not have confidence that you can execute the option or things are going to work out exactly as you want them to. That's why you think. When a confident person says, I think there's a better way, they're confident that there's a better way to do it. The overthinker is going, I hope there's a better way, or maybe there's a better way, and I should maybe look for that better way because I'm not confident in any of the ones that are in front of me. The confident person that looks
And
deliberately
they
for a
never get
better
to
way
do the thing at
knows
the
that
end
what's in
anyway.
front of me is
Yeah.
not good enough. The overthinker is looking at going, what's in front of me is potentially not good enough and there's potentially a better answer. Yeah, it's fear paralysis. Well, those are they're just fearful to act in general, right? Yeah, I think we just need to define the scenarios a bit more clearly. Because for me, like the root cause of overthinking is you are uncertain of an outcome, and therefore, and like I said, it's risk mitigation. There's a lack of confidence, an innate lack of confidence in overthinking. Whereas thinking to a point and doing the due diligence and then being confident in an answer, that's not overthinking. That's just what is the word Yash used? Um, there was Yash. What is the word you used?
Calculated, methodical. I don't know.
It definitely is cyclic, and they do feed. But I think the initial cause of it is, like you say, trauma, and then the trauma causes a lack of confidence, and the lack of confidence leads to overthinking to compensate for that. Then, yeah, you're stuck in that spiral. Self doubt. Yeah, I think there's. I mean, impulse is completely the opposite end of the scale to what like compulsive overthinking is, right? But a confident person doesn't just act on impulse. They will walk into a situation, analyze it, and be confident in a decision. So they're not just going off instinct. They've taken the instinct into account and they've said, okay, well, there's my instinct, and then these are the scenarios, and I think this is the best way to go, and then they'll make a decision. My problem with overthinking and why I say it's rooted in self doubt is that you are not confident in the outcome, and that's why I see it that way.
Yeah. But those are obviously
And
like
that's
the
what the
extremes,
need
right? You
for
could
risk
also be an
mitigation is,
overthinker,
like
but also
extreme risk
be one of those
mitigation.
people that's okay with making um, instinctual decisions based on the risks that are in front of you. I mean, that's ideally how you want to live your life, right? You want to see what's in front of you and make a decision as soon as you can.
But is that overthinking or just being measured?
That's being measured, right? I would say that's being measured. You look at the things and say, okay,
That's the perfect balance, though, right?
right.
That's like the ideal scenario.
Ideally, yes. I mean, like Yash, I think Yash was saying that he does things in a certain way where he finds his mentality changing. He instantly realigns himself, right? It's also that sort of thing. Like, say, for example, you have a big decision in front of you. You say, I'll give myself a maximum time of an hour to decide on this. Whereas if it's a small decision, I'll give myself 5 minutes to decide on this. You know, you could be one of those people that if you notice that you're an overthinker, you could create the situation in your life where wherever you find that you've got a really tough decision, you say, okay, I'll think about it for one day. And at the end of the day, I must make a decision based on all the facts in front of me, right? That teaches the person to learn how to do risk evaluation and mitigation quickly enough, you know. And I think that's a good way, because what I would do is whenever I was stuck with a situation I didn't understand, I'd just be literally like, what are the things in front of me? Like a pros and cons list, right? These are the things that I have in front of me. This is a decision I'm going to make. I give myself a day, I'll make a decision. Whereas otherwise, you sit there thinking about something for like 3 days and nothing happens.
What you just described there is so good because you're describing the route or the pathway to go from a compulsive overthinker to someone who's measured.
Right. So that's ideally what you should do in your life, right? I mean, you should also teach yourself how to make decisions based on your own intellect. But people forget that
Yeah, but you
yeah,
basically just gave people the recipe of how to succeed in this process.
yeah,
Like, how do you, if you find that you're really struggling with overthinking, then just do exactly what you just said.
yeah,
Time box yourself in whatever you think is an appropriate time.
yeah,
You know, like, if you want to go the list route, go the list route, do whatever, but like, give yourself a deadline and stick to it. And then you go from being
yeah,
compulsive or
yeah,
overthinker to being measured. And
yeah,
then you can practice this. And as you practice it, you get better at it.
yeah. No, it's a good recipe. The key to learning how to do that, though, and there's a trick. You have to be able to be comfortable, and you have to teach yourself to be comfortable with making a decision based on only all the information you have at that time. And you have to be comfortable with using the information that you have at that time. And then whatever happens after that, be as it may, you know, whatever happens, happens. But you have to learn how to be comfortable with that. Like if something changes based on your decision the next day, then you either adapt or you stick with your original decision.
How do you become comfortable with that?
Practice, literally. You have to
And
learn.
practice
I mean, every
books.
decision that you make isn't going to be the right one at the end of the day anyway.
Well, that you see, that's the
It's always
problem,
going to be
Yash. That's
situational
literally,
to
yeah.
just
What you're saying is literally the
to some
problem,
degree.
though. That's what overthinkers struggle with. They're literally like, every decision I'm going to make is not the right one, so I'm gonna wait until I make the right one, and that's where they fall down. Just make a
But I
decision,
mean,
right?
And that is the
waiting
doubt.
is
That
going to
is
be
the
a forever
doubt.
game. Is a forever game,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
it's you're not going to learn through
yeah.
that
That's
anyway.
why I always say, if you,
We
yeah,
always said we
yeah,
learn
you
through
should
mistakes.
never spend more than. I mean, look, there's big decisions and there's small decisions. Most decisions that you make in your life are not big ones, to be honest with you. Even if you look at them in the grand scheme of things, most things aren't that big.
They're made to be big
They're
in your
made to be
head.
big in your head, correct?
Yes, that's true.
So when you're making a decision, give yourself a day. Worst case, that's a long period. To be honest with you, most decisions can be made within an hour.
I would preface the whole route out of overthinking. So, in my from my point of view, it's either confidence or removal of self doubt. But there's another route, and that is bravery, and that is not to say that you are not fearful, but it's the knowledge that something more important is at stake,
Mm,
right? Courage. So either you employ courage in your decision making, or you employ confidence in your decision making.
mm,
But for me, that would be the easiest way out of overthinking a scenario.
yeah,
So you can still be scared of
Yeah,
what's going to happen, but understand that what's going to happen is more important than just sitting there and doing nothing.
yeah.
I agree. So Anthony Robbins mentions when he discusses the fear or the feeling of fear, he's like, if you're ever fearful of doing something that has the potential of moving you forward, um, think of what's the greater fear of not doing that something. And the fear of not doing that something is actually a greater driver than the fear of actually just going through with the plan in the end anyway. So that's one of his classes on fear and how to get over the emotion of fear
Mm, that that works very well
in
if the
scenarios.
that works very well if the thing that you're fearful of doing, what's it, can move you. You know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Like I said, if something has the potential to move you
yeah,
forward, and you don't do it, then that greater fear of not doing something should drive you into doing it in the
yeah.
first place.
Yeah, where it becomes more harmful to stay in the situation you're currently in than the potential harm
100%.
of what might happen if you do it.
What happens if you're okay with
So
it
I
not
mean,
happening?
you guys mentioned something.
Then you haven't. Then clearly the situation you're currently in is not harmful enough, or you don't see it as harmful enough. Maybe that's the right way to put it.
Okay,
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
okay.
I mean, you guys mentioned, I guess, one way to deal with just your raging mind by making a list or writing it down and pros and cons and things like that. Today I was faced with a situation, of an overthinker, where my mind was racing through certain scenarios, and the moment I realized this was the case, I was like, mind, I appreciate the fact that you're trying to build scenarios out of nothing, but I am taking back control now. So for me, a method of preventing this mind from racing was just speaking out aloud and taking back that control. And then after that, nothing, absolutely nothing. There was no like wild scenarios racing in my mind anymore after I just told it to not do it. So that's another thing that I've
It
practiced
was a
and
very
has
strong,
helped me in
conscious
the past.
act.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be firm with yourself, and
Yes.
disciplined.
And one of the key things in, I guess, getting to that stage where you're able to just speak it out aloud and tell yourself not to do it anymore is identifying the different types. So I'm gonna throw out some 5 types that have plagued me in the past, and then we can go through each one of them. But I'm just gonna just list them out now. So number one thing is
Okay,
mental
before you
chatter.
before you go there, I just want to say,
So,
Number
sorry, when you
two,
say 5 types, what
yeah,
what are the types?
yeah.
What's
So
the,
I'm just
the
gonna say it
blanket
now.
term of types? What is the category the types fall into? Sorry,
No,
Rich, I
just
know you
there's
were
no
about to say
category
something.
really.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
is
So
this the
it's
type of over? Is this the 5 types of overthinking,
yes,
or 5 types of noise in your head?
that I've identified in
Oh,
myself
okay, got you.
or in
Sorry,
my
Guj,
in
what were
my
you going to
yeah,
say?
yeah.
so before you go there, what we should do is label what Yash
Mhm.
did. Yash basically spoke to himself, right? Which is a quality of the insane. But what he did was
Or the genius? I'm
what he
just saying.
did what he did was he labeled the scenario, right? And he said, okay, I'm in a place now where I'm overthinking based on some emotional reaction, or something has happened which has caused my mind to go in, I don't know, a flutter.
Mhm.
um, and w- you corrected that by labeling the situation, right? You never necessarily said that that's what you did, but mentally that's what you did. You said, okay, I'm currently experiencing some over emotional reaction to something, and the only way I can stop this is by labeling the situation, which then told your mind that it doesn't need to react like this, right? And
Yes,
that
yeah.
is the key driver in how you start the decision making process to solve an overthinking problem, right? So the key driver, when we say you need to make a decision within an hour, within a day, the key driver is not to say I need to sit and make a decision. The key driver is to notice that you're overthinking, because remember, overthinkers don't notice that they're overthinking. So
Mhm.
the inflection point is not
That's true.
I need to make a decision. It's am I overthinking currently? Because an overthinker is very comfortable in overthinking, so they won't even notice that they're doing it, right? So the first thing that you need to do is say, is the thing that I'm doing now actually happening in front of me, or do I need to make a decision and move on? The only way you do that is by labeling that, right?
Mhm.
And you have to learn within yourself and practice within yourself that, like Yash has done, to um, to label it, and that's the key point that you need to start focusing on if you're an overthinker. I mean, you must already know
There's
it,
one
right?
additional. There's one other thing that he did. I think is really important, and that's he made himself accountable. He's like, okay, mind, but I'm taking charge now, and he took accountability, and that's where the progression kicked.
Yeah,
And I think that's something a lot of overthinkers have to do is just make yourself accountable. It's like no one else is going to make the decision for you. So you can sit there and overthink till the cows come home, but at the end of the day, you are still responsible.
Correct.
correct.
Yes. Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. Yeah.
Okay,
Thanks for
five
clarifying that.
types.
Say again. Oh yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So the ones that I've identified at least, one is mental chatter. Two is, I
Yeah,
think we've also
Mm-hmm.
mentioned this, our reading into things, just exploding a situation into something it's not. Um,
yeah,
Minor issue into major issue, even.
yeah,
Mind reading, so that's predicting, I guess, what others are going to say and what others say about you and that whole thing. thoughts on a past long gone, and worrying about the
Why
future.
does it have to be so cryptic? Thoughts on a
What you mean?
past long gone.
I
So
thought
so
It's you
because
mysterious.
know.
it sounds so. Yes, it
So
sounds nice when you actually say it like that.
I was reading Charles Dickens. So Christmas Carol. So
Of course, you were.
they use that type of syntax. In the olden days. So thoughts on a past long gone. So it fits, right?
It does. It
So
does.
that's why I used that.
I like
Yeah.
it.
So how do you agree with that general list that I have? Have you all experienced any more? Um, do you want to pick on any one of the five and just expand on them? Because I think we did talk about our reading into things, and our just exploding things into not what they should be. I mean, we haven't talked about, I guess, thoughts on a past long gone, for example, like just past scenarios and replaying them over and over in your mind, and then the contrary to that is just the worrying about the future. Playing that in your mind, playing scenarios of those in your mind as well.
I suppose one comes from a place of regret and one is trying to avoid regret.
True. Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, are there
I
any other
can't think
five?
of
I mean, any
any
other things
others.
that you'd like to
No,
add?
I think for me the major one is always overthinking. Always led to minor to major, right?
Yeah.
That's always the major one, right? Minor becomes something really big that you can't control anymore because you've extended the scenario so many times.
Mm.
Yeah. I don't know if the first one to me is overthinking, right?
Mental chatter.
Mental chatter to me, yeah, that's like feedback, right?
Can you define mental chatter so I understand?
Just consistent rambles in your mind. Just you
Yeah, but
talking
that's
to yourself,
feedback, right?
basically. Yeah.
Can you give me an example?
You talking to yourself.
Sorry, I know I sound
no,
really
no,
dim
no,
here,
no,
but
no, 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 no. That's cool. I mean, you
Hey, this
having a
is too dumb. We have to kick him out.
hey, I'm gonna get voted off the podcast. Like, sorry,
you
viewers,
are
this
the
is the
weakest
last week
link.
you'll hear from
Bring
me.
me, bring me your torch. Bring me a torch. I'll put that thing
Next week, it's just Gujin. Yes,
out. Back to being a duo.
I have to go
No,
back on
so
this.
this is
Yeah.
yeah. Mental chatter is the way I describe it to myself is me talking to myself. So role playing, me talking to myself, basically. So I'm
No,
playing
I agree with Prashant. Then I don't think it's
roles.
overthinking. I think it's
Yeah,
processing.
It's like feedback, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
you're just trying to process information.
and that's how like I play scenarios. I need someone to kind of, like you're saying now, role play off, and give me feedback. So I talk to myself in my head, that sort of thing.
I
Yeah.
think that's healthy.
No, yeah, but I mean, in the context of where conversations in your mind can take you, it might not be so much
I think if you stop talking to other people because you prefer talking to yourself, that's where it's a problem.
yeah.
But I think what you're doing is perfectly fine. I don't think there's an issue there. If you woke up one morning and just deleted all of us and be like, you know what, it's no point talking to all of you because I'd rather talk to myself, then I'd say that's a problem. That's it's not a good place to be.
Okay, good. Then so you mentioned minor to major is one of the things that you identify with. What's your approach as a remedy to kind of stop minor to major in its tracks?
Oh, as soon as I notice it, I just like, okay, everything that I've been thinking should just be trashed into the bin.
Okay, how do you notice it? Yeah, how do you notice it? How do you notice it?
Because
I guess. What's your mechanism trigger?
yeah, I find myself. It's like spacing out, right? I
Mm.
find myself sometimes I'm just spacing out, like not doing what I should be doing, right? Because generally, most of the time, you should be doing some sort of action. Nobody just sits there and stares at a wall, right? In
I
most
do
time,
sometimes.
most no, but like unless you're actually meditating, right? Um, you're in a state of I'm doing something. I'm
Mm.
cooking, I'm working, I'm eating, I'm playing a game, I'm watching TV, I'm something is happening, right?
Mhm.
Physically. When that physical activity has stopped for a certain period of time, right? And then you find yourself not doing that physical activity anymore because you were off somewhere into the distance, right? You were either overthinking or you were thinking about something, right? When you realize that you were overthinking, you just personally for me, I just take all of that and I burn it, right? Completely, right?
When you say burn it,
Because like whatever I was thinking, unless it was I've actually come to a decision in that period I was overthinking, right? I burn all of the decision, like all
So you
the thoughts,
disregard
because
them, and it's like
I
nonsensical
disregard
Cast it
them.
from your mind, never to darken your
Yes,
days ever
in
again.
into the shadows and the flame, right? As you so adventurously would like to speak.
Yeah.
So for me, the reason I burn everything personally is because if I haven't come to a decision, most of it's like, why am I doing this? What's the point? Let's just carry on doing. And then when it comes to the time that I need to make a decision,
Mm.
I've sort of learned that I make decisions when I need to make decisions based on all the information in front of me. But I don't want to make a decision before I need to make it, right? And because I won't have all the information in front of me at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Information can change by the time I get to the time that I need to make a decision.
Yes.
So I've learned to become this person that I need to make, like, if I know that I need to decide in 3 hours time, I'm only going to decide at the 3 hours time, right? Even though I might have made a decision about it now, the information at the time that I'm going to actually give an answer on the decision that I'm making, either to myself or to somebody else, right? The information
Mm.
at that time is there, right? I do it that way because I find that it's just easier to not have to think about something when I don't need to think about it.
And there's no anxiety and no stress there.
If it removes anxiety, correct? It
Mm-hmm.
removes stress.
At that point, I guess, when you
It's
have it
not
so
avoiding
structured.
the issue, right?
No, no, of course
Is
not. I
you
mean,
can
you
say
just
in
said,
some way that it's avoiding the issue, right? But it's not like I'm not making a decision. I'm just deferring the
yeah, I mean,
time
you
in
said
which
at
I
the
need to make a
3 hour time
decision
limit,
because
that
for me
time
it's
horizon, you said.
always the key thing is it's about and as I said earlier, the key point is about being
I think if you made the decision
yeah,
before the three
it's about
hours, there'd be
information,
anxiety.
right? If you don't have the right information, I don't want to make a decision based on half information, right? Or even if I have
Mm.
it, it may change by the time I make the decision. So when I'm making decisions, the key thing is always to be happy with the decision that you're making with the information at the time. Don't make a decision before and don't make a decision after. Make the decision when you're good and comfortable to make it with the information you have. And information for me is the key thing. It's always the key thing. Otherwise, you just how can you make a decision without information?
I mean, that's a key part of our lives now, anyway, right?
Yeah. If you're making a decision without information, then you're just guessing anyway, right?
Yes.
Then you start the sentence with "I'm guessing," right? I'm guessing, and this is what I
Yep.
think based on what my
Hoping for the
brain knows.
best.
This is what we're doing, right? That's
Yeah.
how
I'm hoping.
that's how I see things personally.
And Dean, did you identify with any of the five? Do you have anything to add to those five?
The mental chatter thing, I wouldn't consider as overthinking because I have quite a lot of it. My inner monologue, like I'm not that talkative outwardly, but I'm very talkative inwardly, because there's always stuff that I'm trying to work through in my head and trying to understand, and it comes from a place of I need to consolidate information and then store it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with mental chatter. In terms of the others, what are the other four again?
Our reading into things.
See, I'm not
Minor.
overthinking it.
Yeah, true. Our reading into things. Minor issue into major. Mind reading. Predicting what scenarios are going to be, what others.
Like I've had problems in the past where I've read into things and it's turned a minor issue into a major issue, and I've misinterpreted what is going to happen based off that. So perception versus reality again,
Yes. Yeah.
and that's just because when I overthought those scenarios, I didn't have a good enough handle on the reality of the situation, and
And then
practicing over time
your
is
presumption
led to.
then. So how do you stop your presumptions? So Prash mentioned how he did his. I mentioned how I do mine. How do you stop it?
When the reality of the situation comes to light and I saw how wrong I was like, okay, something's not right here. I need to reevaluate the process
So
because
so when,
clearly I don't know what I'm doing. So,
so for you it's when you walk into the wall, basically.
yeah, it's exactly that. And then you start learning that when you're scenario planning, you need to adjust your parameters to be more realistic.
Yeah.
Because what I thought was realistic previously was not. It's just a very skewed perception. And you need to account for that.
Okay. And then the last two, I guess, is just the the reminiscing about the past, and then fantasizing about the future.
But why is
Is that
reminiscing about the
overthinking?
past? Yeah, why I was just gonna ask the same thing.
Yeah,
Are
like
those last
define
two overthinking?
or explain or yeah.
So, for example, do you ruminate over the past? For example, do you look at situations in the past and then think out different scenarios to them, because that's overthinking. You're playing out what could have happened in the past if you acted differently, or you said something
Yeah,
differently, or
that's
did
but
things
isn't that
differently.
more
That's
lamenting than
ruminating.
overthinking? Yeah, okay, look, it is
Well, it's
overthinking, right?
remember
It's
it's still,
overthinking a point
yeah,
that's already passed, right?
yeah. But you're
Yeah, but
also you
like,
want to you're playing
yeah,
scenarios that you could have
yeah,
changed and maybe could, and
yeah.
you're playing in your mind now that could have turned out differently. That's why I listed
That's
it as
it's the word is lamenting.
ruminating is also a word.
It's called
Yeah,
torturing yourself. Is
Yeah.
what it is.
but
No,
not
look,
to
I
be.
think
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Let's just be clear. Let's be clear, right? If
Yeah.
you were doing it to understand what you could have done differently and learn from the situation, healthy,
Yeah.
100%, go ahead and do that, right?
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
all for that. But if you sit there and you obsess and you torture yourself and you feel guilty and you feel regret, that's
Yeah.
not healthy. You're just sitting there and torturing yourself.
Yeah.
It's not going to help you.
No.
You don't learn or gain anything from it. It's just what you're doing is you're draining a massive amount of energy because those emotions are heavy emotions that take a lot of energy.
Hmm.
And you're not getting anything out of it. You're giving so much away.
Agreed. And then the worrying about the future. Do you if you do that? No. And play out
That's it's
scenarios.
like what's it? There's a thing of I don't know, some all these famous people, they say, you know what, well, even a master Ugwe, he's
Yeah.
like all about the past, the present, and the future. Like if you
Oh yeah,
worry
I know
about the
about. I know that
past,
saying. I know
right?
that saying. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Right?
I
If
love
you
that
worry
saying.
about the past, what is it? You worry about the past? Um you are Sadhguru says this: if you worry about the past, something happens. If you worry about the future, you're in anxiety. If you just live in the present, you'll be comfortable.
Hmm.
So it's
The
like if you
past is
worry
history,
about,
the future is a mystery, and the present is a gift.
That's why
yeah,
it's
yeah,
That's
but
what
this
Ugo
one
is
takes
saying.
it takes it to another level where you're using the, so like if you're sitting, worrying about the future all the time, you're creating anxiety within yourself, right?
hmm.
If you sit and worry about the past all the time, you're basically just hurting yourself, right?
Yeah.
When I say
Mm.
worry, I'm not saying learn from the past. I'm saying worry about the past, right?
Yeah.
And then if you just sit and you live comfortably within your current presence, that should be where you're most comfortable. I must find that saying by Sadhguru. And I think I remember he said something about it. I must
I
just
mean,
double
but
check that.
that's that
But it's a
philosophy.
nice
Those
one.
philosophies, I guess, by
Yeah.
both masters, as it were. I mean, just speak to relaxing your mind in the moment, or just letting it flow in the moment, and not letting it to its own devices. Past, present. I mean, past, future.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, okay. It's actually by Lao Tzu, right? It's
oh
if
yeah,
you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you are anxious, you are living in the future. If you're at peace, you're living in the present.
Mm.
and
I
that
like
kind
it.
of summarizes where you want your mind to be in any case. You want it to be stable in
Yes,
one persistent
correct.
frame of thought, and not multiple frames of thought, as we kind of discuss here today with this overthinking stuff.
Yeah. Lao Tzu.
so, so any last thoughts on overthinking, or any last advices, or any last anecdotes would you like to add?
I think overthinking is
No.
as an action, it's obviously quite. It's got a full range of outcomes, but look at the process that you engage in and try and use the process for good, rather than using it to sort of mitigate fear. Use the process of understanding scenarios to help you make better decisions, not to cripple you from making decisions altogether.
Agreed.
Uh, I,
Good.
I, I think overthinking is pretty much like a huge portion of the global population, right? People are all overthinkers. A lot of people are overthinkers purely because of the emotional scarring that they've probably been through, or they've seen it elsewhere and they've tried to adopt it because it's helped the other person or something like that. But if you find that you're an
Or they've
overthinker,
seen emotional scarring happen to someone
yeah.
else, and they're like, I don't want that in my
I
life.
think for me, overthinking is not the worst thing in the world. I think it's more of when you're a person who struggles to make decisions on the simplest of things, right? Because
Mm.
of overthinking, right? That's when you need to learn how to control it. Because nearly everybody is an overthinker in some way. What thing is that if you're struggling to make simple decisions based because of overthinking, that's when you need to learn how to control it because then it becomes debilitating.
Yep, I agree with that.
Hmm. To you listeners, thank you so much for listening in to our rambles at times, and we hope you gain some value that you can use in your life. So, this is your bro code signing off. Have a powerful day. Until next time, cheers.